The city's lights pulsed below, casting fractured shadows across the room as if echoing the secrets held within its walls. High above the sprawling skyline, Echelon Dynamics headquarters loomed like a fortress of glass and steel, silent and watchful. The night was hushed, filled with the electric hum of technology that permeated every corner of the building. In the heart of its strategic command center, General Marcus Steele stood before an enormous holographic display, his face etched with hard lines as the data washed over him in hues of blue and violet. His gaze was fixed, unyielding, as schematics of weapon prototypes, surges of encrypted energy readings, and live feeds from surveillance drones populated the display, projecting a lattice of intricate, interwoven intel across his rugged features. Each feed flickered with strategic data points and tactical overlays, the product of months of clandestine infiltration and precision planning. Surveillance streams from drones hovered over key locations across the city, flashing in and out as they mapped the city's pulse, a city unaware of how closely it was being watched. Behind the general, the strategic command center was alive with a subdued intensity. Operators whispered urgent commands into headsets, eyes glued to monitors, hands darting over controls as if orchestrating an invisible symphony. The air was dense, heavy with anticipation, and every detail in the room seemed to reverberate with the weight of decisions yet to be made. For Steele, the world outside was a distant murmur, eclipsed by the gravity of the screen before him. Nathan Cole entered the room silently, his presence acknowledged only by the subtle nod from the general. Clad in a sharp, dark suit, Nathan exuded confidence. His eyes held a sharpness that hinted at the dual life he led. "You're late," the general remarked without turning, his gravelly voice echoing in the spacious chamber. Nathan approached the display, his gaze fixed on the hologram. "Had some unfinished business to attend to." "Your encounter with the Quantum Guardian," the general stated flatly. "It didn't go as planned." Nathan's jaw tightened. "He's more powerful than we anticipated. His abilities, he's mastering them faster than our projections." The general tapped a few commands into the console, bringing up footage of the rooftop battle between Shadowstrike and the Quantum Guardian. "Your armor sustained significant damage." "I underestimated him," Nathan admitted reluctantly. "It won't happen again." The general turned to face him, his steely eyes piercing. "See that it doesn't. Our timeline is accelerating. Project Genesis cannot afford any more setbacks." Nathan crossed his arms, his demeanor cool. "With all due respect, General, we need more resources. Overclock's failure indicates that our current technology isn't sufficient to counter the Quantum Guardian." The general's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. "I anticipated this. That's why I've authorized the deployment of the Eclipse Protocol." Nathan's eyes widened slightly. "The Eclipse Protocol? That's still in the experimental phase." "Not anymore," the general replied, inputting another command. The holographic display shifted to reveal the schematics of a new suit, sleeker, more advanced, and brimming with lethal capabilities. "This will level the playing field." Nathan studied the design, his mind racing. "It's impressive, but without proper field testing." "That's where you come in," the general interrupted. "As Shadowstrike, you've already demonstrated your proficiency in harnessing quantum energy. With the Eclipse suit, you'll have the power to surpass the Quantum Guardian." Nathan considered the proposal. "And what about the instability issues?" The last simulations indicated a high risk of quantum feedback. The general dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "Our engineers have resolved the critical flaws. Besides, risks are necessary for progress." Nathan's gaze hardened. "I'll need access to the full research data and a dedicated team to assist with the integration." "Granted," the general said. "But remember, time is of the essence. Every moment we delay, the Quantum Guardian gains more influence. Public sentiment is shifting in his favor, which could complicate our objectives." Nathan tore his gaze away from the dimly glowing monitor, frustration rippling through his posture. His thoughts churned with conflict. "What about the infiltration at Quantum Core?" he asked, voice edged with tension. "Is our asset still embedded?" A shadow passed over the general's stern face. "Dr. Mitchell remains in position," he replied, voice graver than usual. "But his utility is dwindling. Ethan Cross and Sarah Hale are on the hunt, and they're zeroing in. It won't be long before Mitchell is exposed." Nathan clenched his jaw, calculating. "Then we need to extract him. If they link him to us, the fallout could blow open the entire operation." The general's expression didn't change, his jaw set with practiced indifference. "Mitchell is expendable," he stated flatly, as though reading from a script. "His purpose was to feed us intel, secure us the data we needed to push Quantum Core's technology far beyond the competition. That's done. His fate, at this point, is inconsequential." Nathan's eyes narrowed, struggling to reconcile his instincts with the general's ruthless pragmatism. "Collateral damage," he murmured, his voice laced with a touch of bitterness. The general met his gaze, unflinching. "Precisely," he replied, but there was something in his tone, a coldness that felt heavier than usual. He shifted, tapping a few keys on the control panel beside him, bringing up a screen filled with encrypted files. "Besides, we still have leverage." Nathan's eyes flicked to the screen, his stomach tightening as the image appeared, a woman's face, her expression tired, her surroundings stark and utilitarian. "Dr. Mitchell's wife. We have her stashed at an undisclosed facility," the general said, his voice now a measured monotone. "Mitchell knows the consequences of betrayal. He's fully aware of what's at stake, so he'll keep playing his part until it's no longer tenable. But his loyalty is bought, Nathan, not earned. So the moment he's no longer of use." The general's hand dropped to his side, his fingers drumming a slow, deliberate rhythm against his thigh, as if marking the countdown of Mitchell's remaining time. Nathan exhaled, his mind racing. This was a line he wasn't sure they could come back from. And what if Cross and Hale get to him before we decide to cut him loose? Then, the general said, his gaze unyielding, they'll find nothing but a shattered man and the remnants of his loyalty. And we'll be long gone. For a moment, the room was silent, the gravity of their decision pressing down on both of them. Nathan nodded slowly, though a flicker of doubt flashed in his eyes. "Understood." The general stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Remember why we're doing this, Nathan. The world is changing, and only those with the vision and strength to seize control will shape the future." Nathan met his gaze. "A new world order, guided by those who can harness the true potential of quantum energy." "Exactly," the general said with a hint of fervor. "Echelon dynamics will not just be at the forefront, we will be the architects of a new era." Nathan turned back to the holographic display, studying the Eclipse suit's design. "I'll begin preparations immediately. But we should consider a multifaceted approach. The Quantum Guardian isn't just powerful, he's gaining public trust. We need to undermine his influence." A sly smile played on the general's lips. "I have a plan for that as well. Our media division is ready to launch a campaign that will cast doubt on his intentions. Highlight the dangers of unchecked vigilantes wielding unknown powers." "Propaganda," Nathan remarked. "It might buy us some time, but if he continues to save lives, the public might not be so easily swayed. Then we'll manufacture incidents that force him into no-win scenarios," the general countered. "Situations where his interference results in collateral damage." Nathan considered the implications. "That's a dangerous game. Innocent people could get hurt." The general's eyes narrowed. "A necessary sacrifice for the greater good. Or have you developed a conscience?" Nathan straightened, his expression guarded. "I remain committed to our mission." "Good," the general said curtly. "Focus on your role. Leave the rest to me." As Nathan exited the Strategic Command Center, his mind was awash with conflicting emotions. The corridors of Echelon Dynamics felt colder, the clinical efficiency of the facility now carrying an undercurrent of menace. He made his way to the quantum integration lab, where the Eclipse suit awaited. Meanwhile, the hum of machinery filled the air at Quantum Core Technologies, where innovation and secrecy coexisted in equal measure. The facility thrived with the focused energy of cutting-edge research, and every lab and workstation buzzed with purpose. In a secluded control room, lined with rows of monitors and advanced computing equipment, Ethan Cross and Sarah Hale worked side by side, their faces illuminated by the glow of multiple displays. "Check this out," Sarah said, her finger tracing a line of code that flickered across her screen. Her voice was low, the hint of urgency unmistakable. "There's been a series of unauthorized access attempts over the last few nights, all originating from Lab 4. Ethan leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "Always during the graveyard shift," he noted. "Who's on duty in Lab 4 at those times?" Sarah's fingers danced across her keyboard as she pulled up the personnel schedule. "Only a small group of staff, mostly senior researchers. But Dr. Mitchell's credentials were used during each incident." Ethan's brow furrowed, a look of confusion settling on his face. "Dr. Mitchell? He's been with Quantum Core for years. One of our top scientists. This doesn't make sense. Unless someone's using his credentials without him knowing," Sarah suggested, glancing at him. "Or worse, he's being forced to do it." Ethan's eyes met hers, a seriousness passing between them. If Echelon Dynamics is involved, they might be leveraging this for something big. "We need to find out what Mitchell knows, and fast." Sarah nodded, her expression steely. "Agreed. I'll set up a honeypot. We'll create false data embedded with trackers. If the mole accesses it, we'll have a direct line to trace them." "Smart move," Ethan said, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "Always one step ahead." Sarah smirked slightly, a flicker of warmth cutting through the intensity of the moment. "Teamwork makes the dream work, right?" Their gazes lingered a fraction longer than necessary, an unspoken connection simmering just beneath the surface before they turned back to their work. Later that night, the facility fell into an eerie stillness. The usual hum of activity was replaced by the quiet pulse of machines and the distant echo of security patrols walking the corridors. Ethan and Sarah remained in the control room, their eyes glued to the monitors, waiting for the trap to spring. "He's taking the bait," Sarah whispered excitedly as a red alert flashed on her screen. "Unauthorized access detected, Lab 4, right now." Ethan's expression hardened. "Let's move." They moved quickly, navigating the dimly lit corridors with practiced precision. The glow from emergency lights cast long shadows on the walls as they crept toward Lab 4. When they arrived, they peered through the observation window. Inside, Dr. Mitchell was hunched over a terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard, his posture tense and agitated. Ethan exchanged a glance with Sarah. "He looks distressed. This isn't the behavior of someone who's acting freely." Sarah nodded, her eyes sharp and alert. "We need to approach this carefully. If he's being coerced, we don't want to scare him off." With a nod, Ethan pushed open the door, the hinges creaking softly. "Dr. Mitchell," he called in a low, calm voice. Mitchell jolted, nearly knocking over his chair as he spun around, his eyes wide with fear. "Ethan." "Sarah. What are you doing here?" "We could ask you the same question," Sarah replied gently, taking a step closer. "The lab is supposed to be secured at this hour." Mitchell's eyes darted between them, panic clear in his expression. I was just catching up on some work," he stammered, the lie hanging heavy in the air. Ethan moved closer, his tone a mix of firmness and empathy. "We know about the unauthorized access attempts, Doctor. If something's wrong, you can trust us. We're here to help." For a moment, Mitchell's face crumpled, the facade cracking. He took a shuddering breath, the weight of his burden evident. They have my wife, he whispered, his voice barely audible. They told me if I didn't give them the data, they'd hurt her. Sarah's eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. Who has her? Is it Echelon Dynamics? Mitchell nodded miserably, his shoulders slumping. Yes. They didn't leave me any choice. I've been trying to keep them satisfied while figuring out a way to save her, but he paused, his voice breaking. I don't know what to do. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We'll get her back, Mitchell. But we need your cooperation. The more we know, the faster we can act. Sarah stepped in, her eyes intense. Do you have any idea where they're holding her? Mitchell shook his head, his hands trembling. No. They're careful. All they said was that as long as I cooperated, she'd remain safe. They contact me through encrypted messages. No names, no locations. Ethan's eyes met Sarah's, and he gave a quick nod. Then we set our own terms. We need to extract him, and we'll start by turning the tables on Echelon. If they think Mitchell is still useful, we can use that to our advantage. Sarah's gaze was resolute. We'll find her, Dr. Mitchell. But first, we need to move fast. Echelon Dynamics has underestimated us. The corridors of quantum core technologies felt like a maze of secrets and shadows as Ethan, Sarah, and Dr. Mitchell moved with purpose, their expressions tense. They pushed through the double doors of Mr. Lennox's office, where the executive sat behind his desk, a series of holographic displays casting a bluish glow over his stern features. Mr. Lennox looked up, his eyes sharp as he registered their urgency. Ethan, Sarah, what's the situation? I take it you have something for me. Ethan, playing his role to perfection, kept his expression composed. We've confirmed the presence of a mole, sir. Dr. Mitchell was being blackmailed by Echelon Dynamics. They've taken his wife hostage to force him into accessing and leaking sensitive data. Lennox's eyes darkened, and he nodded slowly, his suspicions confirmed. I knew something was wrong. I had a feeling Echelon was behind this. His gaze shifted to Dr. Mitchell, who stood with his head bowed, clearly overwhelmed. I'm sorry you've been dragged into this, Doctor. We'll do everything we can to get her back. Thank you, Mitchell whispered, the relief in his voice tinged with fear. Lennox's focus sharpened, his decision made. I'll send in a security team, fully armed and prepped for extraction. We'll have your wife out before Echelon even knows we're coming. Before Mitchell could react, Ethan interjected, holding up a hand. No, sir. That's too risky. He glanced at Sarah, who met his eyes with a knowing look, the unspoken understanding between them a silent agreement. Echelon Dynamics will be expecting a move like that. They've set a trap. If we send a team, they'll be ready for it, and we can't afford that risk. Lennox frowned, confusion flashing across his face. What's your alternative? We can't just leave her there. Ethan took a breath, keeping his composure steady. We need someone who operates outside the lines, someone Echelon can't predict. We need the Quantum Guardian. Lennox's expression shifted, a skeptical edge creeping in. The Quantum Guardian? The vigilante who's been popping up around the city? Are you sure we can trust him with something like this? This is a delicate situation. We're talking about a life. Before Ethan could respond, Sarah spoke up, her voice firm. I know we can trust him. He saved my life. She paused, the memory of that night flickering in her eyes. Shadowstrike tried to kill me when I got too close to uncovering the truth about the General. If it wasn't for the Quantum Guardian, I wouldn't be here right now. Lennox's eyes flicked to her, surprised. When you were investigating the General's connection to Echelon and your parents' work? She nodded. Yes. The Quantum Guardian intervened. He saved me when I fell from that high-rise. He risked everything to pull me back from the edge. Her voice softened, but the conviction remained. He's not just a vigilante. He's a hero. And he's our best shot at getting Dr. Mitchell's wife out safely. Lennox seemed to weigh her words, and he looked to Ethan, seeking confirmation. Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. I trust Sarah's judgment. The Guardian is unpredictable, and that's exactly what we need right now. Echelon dynamics can anticipate our usual moves, but they won't see him coming. Lennox exhaled, still unsure but visibly moved by Sarah's conviction. All right, but there's still the matter of contacting him. How do we even reach the Quantum Guardian? He's not exactly easy to find. Ethan kept his expression neutral, suppressing a smile. Sarah knows how to get in touch with him. Sarah nodded, her eyes meeting Ethan's with a silent acknowledgement of the secret they both shared. Leave it to me, Mr. Lennox. I know how to reach him. Lennox nodded, the decision made. All right. But make it quick. Every second counts. As they left the office, Ethan and Sarah exchanged a glance, the weight of their secret hanging between them. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. You know what to do? Sarah smirked, a glint of confidence and mischief in her eyes. I think I can handle it, Guardian. We've got this. Ethan nodded, his demeanor relaxing slightly. Let's get to work. The clock's ticking. In a laboratory fortified by impenetrable security protocols, the general stood motionless before a vast, reinforced viewport that overlooked the heart of Echelon Dynamics' most secretive project. The cavernous chamber below was a vision of cold, calculated power, dominated by the ominous presence of the quantum reactor at its center. It pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light, the tendrils of energy swirling and snapping like restless serpents imprisoned within a glass cage. The air thrummed with its unstable power, casting distorted shadows across the walls. The general's expression was as hard as the steel that framed the room. Without turning, he addressed the figure behind him. Dr. Cross. From the shadows emerged Dr. John Cross, his silhouette outlined by the soft blue glow of the reactor. His presence was as commanding as it was enigmatic, a man shaped by years of relentless work and sleepless nights. His salt and pepper beard framed a face lined with age and burden, eyes darkened by the weight of secrets and sacrifices made in the name of science. Clad in a lab coat worn from countless experiments, he carried a tablet covered in a maze of equations and schematics, evidence of his brilliance and the heavy price it demanded. Yes, General, he replied, his tone calm but edged with a weariness that hinted at unspoken doubts. The general remained fixated on the reactor, his eyes narrowed as the tendrils of energy writhed within their containment. How soon can we initiate Project Genesis? His voice was cold, cutting through the silence with the precision of a blade. Dr. Cross hesitated, the numbers and calculations flashing through his mind. He knew the stakes, knew the cost of failure, but the implications were far more severe. The reactor is approaching operational capacity, he began, choosing his words carefully. But without the final data sets, the stabilization matrix remains incomplete. Activating it now could result in unpredictable outcomes, especially considering the power we're dealing with. The general's jaw tightened, and he turned slowly, his eyes locking onto Cross with a steely intensity. Unpredictable outcomes, he repeated, his voice a low, simmering growl. You assured me that your expertise could handle any variables. Cross met the general's gaze, the gravity of the situation clear in his eyes. General, Project Genesis isn't just another energy initiative. If activated without full stabilization, it has the potential to rewrite realities. Quantum energy of this magnitude isn't just about power, it's about altering the very fabric of existence. Without the complete data sets, we have no guarantee of controlling what it could unleash. The general's eyes flashed with a cold fire. Your job is not to lecture me on risks, Doctor. Your job is to mitigate them. I don't care about theoretical threats, I care about results. Cross's shoulders sagged slightly under the weight of the command, and for a moment, his eyes flicked to the reactor, its energy dancing like a living thing. Ethan would know what to do, he thought, a pang of regret flashing through him. His son, now distant and enigmatic in his own right, had inherited his brilliance. But there were secrets even between them a secrets Cross was unwilling to acknowledge, even now. Taking a deep breath, he turned back to the general. I understand. I'll do everything in my power to stabilize the reactor with the data we currently have. But understand this, the moment we activate, there's no turning back. We could be reshaping reality itself. We must be prepared for any outcome. The general's face was impassive, a mask of unrelenting authority. Good, he said, his tone a final command. Because failure is not an option. If you need anything, resources, personnel, you have it. But get it done. The success of Project Genesis depends on you. Dr. Cross nodded, his expression a mask of professionalism, but inside, he felt the mounting tension of the impossible task ahead. As the general turned back to the viewport, Cross stared at the reactor, the blue glow reflecting in his eyes, and wondered how many lines he was willing to cross to see this through, and whether his own son would one day stand in judgment of his choices. The quantum integration lab sprawled like a cathedral of technology, its ceiling arching high above, lined with conduits and suspended light panels that cast a cold, clinical glow across the expanse. The hum of machinery and the low chatter of scientists filled the air as they moved between workstations, adjusting settings and monitoring the streams of data flowing across their screens. The atmosphere was a blend of anticipation and tension, the kind that settled over a place where the line between innovation and catastrophe was razor-thin. In the center of the lab, elevated on a platform and surrounded by a shimmering, transparent energy field, stood the Eclipse suit, an engineering marvel that seemed almost alive. Its sleek, black surface drank in the light, its design both menacing and elegant. Beneath its surface, veins of crimson energy pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat waiting to unleash untold power. Nathan Cole stepped into the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. His eyes, sharp and calculating, swept over the lab, absorbing every detail. He moved with purpose, and as he approached the platform, Dr. Lydia Mercer, the lead quantum physicist, intercepted him. Her sharp features mirrored the intensity of her gaze, a look that spoke of intelligence honed by years of pushing the boundaries of science. Mr. Cole, she greeted, her tone formal, yet her eyes held an unspoken challenge. We're finalizing the calibration of the suit's quantum stabilizers. Nathan nodded, his expression unreadable. I understand there were issues with the energy regulators. Dr. Mercer's eyes flicked to the Eclipse suit, the lines of worry etched on her face. We've managed to mitigate most of the volatility, but, she hesitated, knowing the weight of her next words, I must caution that prolonged use could still result in quantum dissonance. Nathan's eyes narrowed, his tone flat. Meaning? She held his gaze, her expression unwavering. Your molecular structure could destabilize. The suit's quantum energy fields might disrupt your biosignature, potentially leading to catastrophic failure. In other words, Mr. Cole, the suit could tear you apart from the inside. Nathan absorbed her words, unflinching. Understood. I'll manage. Dr. Mercer arched an eyebrow, skeptical of his confidence. Your confidence is noted, she replied. However, I must insist on additional testing before any field deployment. There's no time for that, Nathan countered, his voice edged with impatience. The Quantum Guardian grows stronger each day, and every moment we wait, he slips further out of reach. We need to act now. A flicker of doubt crossed her eyes, but she knew arguing was futile. Very well, she conceded, though her voice carried a warning. But I advise extreme caution. Nathan approached the suit, his eyes tracing the veins of energy that pulsed beneath its surface. Unlike the Shadow Strike armor he once wore, the Eclipse suit was sleeker, almost organic, as if it had evolved beyond mere armor. The energy it contained hummed with a promise of power, but also of danger. Technicians hurried to their stations, initiating the integration sequence. Nathan stepped onto the platform, his posture rigid as he extended his arms. The suit began to assemble around him, its panels shifting and interlocking with a precision that spoke of cutting-edge engineering. As the quantum core synchronized with his biosignatures, a surge of energy rushed through him, its power electric and intoxicating. "Initiate system diagnostics," he commanded, his voice steady. The synthetic voice responded, echoing through the lab. "All systems nominal. Quantum stabilizers at 97% efficiency." Dr. Mercer monitored the readings closely, her eyes darting between screens. "So far, so good. How do you feel?" Nathan flexed his hands, watching as energy crackled at his fingertips. "Stronger. More connected. Be mindful of the feedback loops," she cautioned, her tone serious. "The suit amplifies your abilities, but it also enhances your neurological impulses. Emotional spikes could trigger unintended reactions." Nathan's voice, modulated through the suit's processors, came out deeper, resonant. "I'll keep that in mind." Stepping down from the platform, the suit moved with him, its fluid motion adapting to his every movement. Lab personnel watched in silence, their expressions a mix of awe and unease. The power contained within the suit was both a marvel and a threat, one they all felt in the air. "Prepare the simulation chamber," Nathan ordered, his eyes cold and focused. "I need to test the combat protocols." Dr. Mercer hesitated, concern etching her features. "Perhaps we should." He cut her off sharply. "Time is short. Begin the sequence." Reluctantly, she signaled the team. "Initializing simulation in 3, 2, 1. The chamber's environment transformed instantly, holographic projectors creating a hyper-realistic urban landscape around him. Buildings loomed, streetlights flickered, and virtual adversaries, armored drones armed with advanced weaponry, materialized, each one calibrated to push the limits of the suit's capabilities. Nathan launched into action, his movements a blur of speed and power. The Eclipse suit amplified his abilities beyond anything the previous armor could achieve. Energy blasts shot from his hands, disintegrating targets with ruthless precision. As more drones swarmed, he pushed the suit harder, tapping into deeper reserves of power, feeling the quantum energy course through him like a living force. Energy levels approaching critical thresholds, Dr. Mercer's voice warned over the calm, tension evident. "Override safety protocols," Nathan commanded, his tone cold and resolute. "That's inadvisable," she protested, panic creeping into her voice. "Do it." She complied, her reluctance palpable. The suit's energy output surged, and Nathan felt a rush, intoxicating, almost euphoric. He unleashed a devastating attack, obliterating the remaining drones in a single, sweeping arc of crimson light. The simulation ended, the holograms fading into nothingness. Nathan stood alone in the silence, his chest heaving. The suit's energy veins pulsed erratically, and for a brief moment, the world around him tilted. He felt a wave of dizziness, his vision blurring. Quantum dissonance detected, the synthetic voice alerted. Dr. Mercer's voice was urgent, almost pleading. "Nathan, you need to power down. Now." He steadied himself, forcing his breathing to slow. Acknowledged. With a practiced motion, he initiated the shutdown sequence. The suit's energy levels gradually stabilized, and the dizziness faded, but the lingering taste of power remained, a dangerous temptation. Dr. Mercer approached as he disengaged the suit, her expression a mixture of relief and frustration. "You pushed it too far. Another few seconds, and we might not be having this conversation." He met her gaze, unyielding. "I needed to know the limits." "Now you do," she replied sternly. "And they're closer than you think. I strongly advise against field deployment until we've addressed the stability issues." Nathan's eyes remained cold. "Your concerns are noted," he said, his tone flat. "But the decision is not yours to make." She shook her head, her expression troubled. "I hope you know what you're doing, Nathan." One misstep, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Without another word, Nathan turned and exited the lab, leaving Dr. Mercer and the team to contemplate the razor-thin line they walked between breakthrough and disaster. The city sprawled beneath him like a sea of lights, flickering and dancing against the backdrop of the night. Nathan Cole sat alone in his private quarters, the silence heavy and unbroken except for the distant hum of the city far below. The room was dim, its only illumination coming from the panoramic window that framed the view, a view of a world that seemed so calm, so peaceful, but one he knew was on the edge of a storm. Nathan leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the cityscape. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph, edges frayed from years of being handled. It was a picture of him and Ethan, taken years ago when the world felt simpler. They stood shoulder to shoulder, grinning with the optimism of youth, their eyes bright with dreams and ambitions. "How things change," he whispered, a ghost of a smile crossing his lips before fading into the heaviness of the present. A shadow fell across the room. The door had opened without a sound, and the figure of the general stood in the doorway, his presence as imposing as ever. "Reminiscing, are we?" His voice cut through the quiet, smooth yet carrying an edge. Nathan slipped the photograph back into his pocket, his face neutral. "Just reflecting on the past." The general stepped further into the room, his gaze sharp as he appraised Nathan. "The past is a luxury we can ill afford, Nathan. We need focus, on the mission, on the future." Nathan's eyes flicked to the general's reflection in the glass before he turned to face him. "I trust you've been monitoring the suit's progress." "I have," the general replied, his tone measured. "An impressive display during the simulation, though I understand you chose to override safety protocols." Nathan's face remained impassive. "Calculated risks. The suit performs as expected. It's ready." The general's eyes narrowed, studying Nathan. "Good. Tomorrow night, you'll deploy. We have intelligence on the Quantum Guardian's patrol routes. We'll engage him when he's vulnerable, on our terms." Nathan rose from his chair, his posture stiffening, preparing himself for the weight of the task ahead. "I'll be ready." The general moved closer, his voice dropping, the tone more personal, more probing. "Remember, Nathan, failure is not an option. Project Genesis is too critical. Eliminating the Quantum Guardian is not just a mission, it's a necessity. Any hesitation could cost us everything." Nathan's eyes met the general's, his expression hardened into a mask of determination. "I understand." The general's gaze lingered, as if trying to see beyond the mask. "Do you?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "Your history with Ethan Cross, are you certain it won't become a complication?" Nathan's jaw tightened, and a flicker of something unspoken crossed his eyes before he forced it down. "Ethan made his choice," he said, his voice firm but not without a hint of bitterness. "He's chosen to stand against us. Sentimentality," the general said, his tone cold and unyielding, "is a weakness. You can't afford it. Make sure it doesn't cloud your judgment when the moment comes." "It won't," Nathan affirmed, but there was a subtle tremor beneath the words, a hint of a man grappling with the shadows of his past. The general studied him for another moment, as if weighing the truth of his words. "See that it doesn't," he said curtly before turning and exiting the room, leaving the door to slide shut with a quiet hiss. As the door sealed, Nathan turned back to the window, the city's lights reflecting in his eyes. His own reflection stared back at him, a figure both familiar and distant. The weight of his choices pressed down, heavier now than ever. He clenched his fist, feeling the tension in his knuckles, the decision he had made to leave the past behind and become the weapon the general needed. But even as he tried to steel himself, the image of Ethan's face, young, hopeful, and trusting, lingered in his mind. And for a brief moment, the resolve that he had built, brick by brick, felt like it might crumble under the weight of the truth he couldn't deny, that despite everything, part of him still cared. As the city below twinkled, unaware of the battles to come, Nathan knew that tomorrow would test him more than any mission ever had. Back at Quantum Core Technologies, the tension was palpable in the control room as Ethan and Sarah worked late into the night. The glow of multiple monitors cast their faces in hues of blue and green, the hum of the equipment the only sound breaking the silence. Schematics, data streams, and surveillance footage flashed across the screens as they pieced together the fragments of information they had gathered. They were on a mission, not just to rescue Dr. Mitchell's wife, but to uncover the location where the general was hiding her. Ethan leaned over a terminal, his fingers flying across the keys as he decrypted another set of surveillance logs. The general is smart. He's kept her off the grid. No usual locations, no traceable activity from Echelon Dynamics that could give away where she is. His voice was calm but carried an edge of frustration. Sarah, seated beside him, narrowed her eyes as she scanned through files. He's too careful for that. If we want to find her, we need to get into the general's inner circle, tap into his personal communications. Ethan nodded, his mind already racing through possibilities. If he's keeping her off the radar, there must be something hidden in Echelon's encrypted channels. We need to access those logs without tipping them off. It's risky, but if we can clone one of their secure servers, we might find a trace. Sarah paused, her eyes meeting Ethan's. You're suggesting hacking into Echelon's secured network directly? That's a level of risk we haven't taken before. We're talking top-tier encryption, one slip, and they'll know we're onto them. Ethan smirked, a glint of determination in his eyes. We've handled worse. Besides, the Quantum Guardian has ways of staying off the radar. I'll take care of the infiltration, and you cover me from here. We'll mask the signal and bounce it through enough proxies to keep them chasing shadows. Sarah's lips curved into a small smile. All right, Guardian. Let's do this. She pulled up the schematics of Echelon Dynamics' digital infrastructure. First, we need to create a decoy file, a digital honeypot to keep them distracted while you go after the real data. If they trace anything, it'll lead them in circles. Ethan began configuring the tools they'd need, his expression focused. Once we have the logs, we'll analyze every scrap of information. The general can't hide everything. If we find even one message or a GPS ping, we can start narrowing down potential sites. Sarah tapped a few keys, pulling up a map of the city and overlaying it with known Echelon Dynamics locations. We know they have hidden facilities. If we cross-reference any pings with these sites, we might get lucky. She glanced at Ethan, her expression serious. But once we have a lead, we'll need to move fast. They won't hesitate to relocate her if they sense we're close. Ethan's eyes locked onto hers, and he nodded. When the time comes, I'll deploy as the Quantum Guardian. We'll make sure she's safe, but we can't let them know it's us working behind the scenes. If they connect Quantum Core to this, they'll retaliate. Agreed, Sarah said, her tone matching his resolve. We play this smart, and we stay one step ahead. The two worked in sync, their movements and thoughts aligned as they set up the infiltration. They moved with practiced precision, Ethan coding lines of complex algorithms to penetrate Echelon's defenses, while Sarah monitored security channels, watching for any sign that their activities were being detected. The room was tense, a quiet but intense energy building as they pushed the boundaries of their skills and technology. After an hour of silent, intense work, Ethan's eyes lit up. I'm in. I've accessed a high-level communications hub within Echelon's network. Looks like encrypted logs and message histories. I'm copying everything now. Sarah's fingers hovered over her keyboard, ready to deploy a countermeasure if needed. Good. Keep the data transfer minimal, small packets. We don't want to raise any alarms. Ethan nodded, his focus unwavering. Copying. And done. I'm disconnecting now. They shouldn't know we were here. As the download completed, Sarah exhaled in relief. Let's see what we've got. She opened the files, her eyes darting across the screen as she decrypted each line of code. Looks like most of these are routine, but here. She highlighted a string of coordinates attached to a series of coded messages. Ethan leaned in, his eyes narrowing. It's a start. Let's cross-reference those coordinates with our map. Sarah quickly input the data, and the map lit up with several markers. 2 of these match known echelon facilities. But this third one. She zoomed in on a point near the outskirts of the city, a remote location surrounded by industrial buildings. This one doesn't match anything in our database. It's isolated, perfect for keeping someone hidden. Ethan's expression grew serious. That's our lead. We'll need to scout it out. If the general is hiding her there, we have to confirm it before we make any moves. Sarah's eyes were determined. We go in tomorrow night. You as the quantum guardian, and I'll be your eyes and ears from here. We'll get her out, Ethan. We can't let them win. Ethan's gaze softened for a moment, the weight of their mission heavy on his shoulders, but there was a spark of determination in his eyes. We won't. We've come too far. The plan was set, and the next stage was about to begin. As they prepared for the rescue operation, both knew the stakes, one wrong move, and they could lose everything. But they also knew that together, they had a chance to turn the tide against echelon dynamics and the general schemes. The city stretched out below like a vast sea of lights and shadows, each flickering street lamp and glowing window a piece of a puzzle he'd learned to navigate. Perched on the edge of a high-rise building, Ethan, fully transformed into the Quantum Guardian, stood like a sentinel, the wind rushing past him. His suit shimmered in the night, its blue energy veins pulsating in rhythm, casting a soft, ethereal glow around him. Extending from his back were wings of pure light, translucent and radiant, fluttering slightly as they adjusted to the currents of the wind. They crackled with energy, shifting in response to his every movement, ready to propel him into action. Far beneath him, nestled between a cluster of abandoned industrial buildings, was the site they had pinpointed. The facility looked unassuming, an old, rusted warehouse with no distinguishing marks. But through the enhanced vision of his mask, Ethan could detect the hidden layers of security, motion sensors disguised among the debris, guards moving in coordinated patterns, and the faint shimmer of an energy shield, an invisible barrier designed to keep intruders out. Sarah, I've got eyes on the target, he murmured, his voice transformed into a low, resonant whisper by the suit's vocal processor. His wings of light shifted subtly, angling to keep his balance as he observed. This is definitely the place. I see movement, guards stationed at every entrance. They're armed and patrolling in tight formation. Back at Quantum Core Technologies, Sarah's fingers danced across her keyboard as she monitored the live feeds. Her face, illuminated by the glow of her console, was tense but focused. I'm tapping into their security network now, she replied. You're right, Echelon's not taking any chances. I'm counting 6 guards outside and another 4 moving within the building. There's a shielded room in the back, that's likely where they're keeping her. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he locked onto the warehouse entrance, his wings folding closer as he crouched low, readying himself. I see it. They've fortified the area, but nothing I can't handle. They're not prepared for someone like me. Sarah's voice, steady and calm, filled his ear. Remember, Ethan, you need to stay undetected. If they sound the alarm, Echelon Dynamics will know someone breached their facility. Get in, secure Dr. Mitchell's wife, and get out before they realize you were ever there. Ethan's gaze shifted to the rooftop access points and narrow windows. He flexed his fingers, feeling the surge of power from the wings at his back. Understood. I'll be in and out before they know it. He paused for a moment, the familiar rush of adrenaline building. And Sarah. Thanks for always having my back. A faint smile tugged at Sarah's lips, though her eyes remained watchful. Always, Guardian. Stay safe. With that, Ethan's wings of light unfurled fully, illuminating the rooftop for a brief moment before he launched silently into the air, descending toward the warehouse like a shadow made of light. The city below remained oblivious, unaware of the silent war unfolding in its midst. As the Quantum Guardian, he was a protector from the shadows, and tonight, he was ready to do whatever it took to bring Dr. Mitchell's wife home.